On this week's episode of Amari Purple Talk, how cool would an Around the World in a Day Super Deluxe be? My thoughts on the Live at the Aladdin sampler and hashtag Prince to me and more. Amari Purple Talk starts now. Welcome to episode 35 of Amari Purple Talk, a Prince podcast where I share my thoughts on the Prince musical singularity. I'm Richard Cole, your imagination funk soloist, and let's get started with today's show. There's a lot going on this week. Everything is changing by the minute, literally. And I thought I was just going to prepare a very simple show, but there's a lot going on. But I'm going to definitely get this out of the way, and then we'll actually start the show. But you gotta. It's getting crazy. I was listening to The War, the new Power Generation single that was released on cassette back in '98. And I felt that was kind of appropriate. I was just playing that while I was doing the final preparation for the show here. And it kind of just reflects what's going on. You know, there's a revolution, and apparently it's being televised. So, you've got people, I know they're tired and whatever, but they're protesting, and it's like, it's getting way out of hand. None of us knows what's going on. I'll put it that way. None of us. There's media, there's politicians, there's a lot of folks caught up in this thing called entropy. And this is a prime example of what happens when entropy rules. Now, like I said, we honestly don't know what's going on, and for those that probably do know what's going on, they're not letting us in on the program. So with that said, it's probably the thing to do is definitely take care of yourself. Stay healthy the best way you can. Nothing, I guess they're saying, is a surefire cure, but you can keep your immune system boosted. Eat your fruits, your vegetables, drink your water. Folks, get some of that alkaline into your system. Try to eat healthy. The air's a bit fresher now that there's not as much pollution. Get some sun, get some vitamin D, get some vitamin C and that elderberry into your system. Protect yourself, protect your physical base. Definitely protect your spiritual base, because basically these folks ain't playing, and there's people, they're so caught up in fear and entropy that they don't care, and they're out here, and they're also, protesting hospitals and things like that, and giving healthcare workers the finger and stuff like that. I'm just going to put it this way: if your allegiances lie with a particular individual that's masquerading as a world leader, and you out here, and like I said, none of us know, you don't know, but you're out here and potentially endangering lives and giving insult to people that are working tirelessly to save lives on a daily basis, then by all means, stop listening to this program now. And as of today, there are listeners that are in a lot of different countries, and China is included. I know there was something regarding folks of, let's just say, African descent that are being treated unfairly. And again, if that is your allegiance, then by all means, stop listening to this program now. Because from my perspective, it seems like one week it was announced that African Americans or black people, period, seem to be the number one carriers of this thing. I ain't believing the hype. I ain't buying it. So if that's giving certain people a wake-up call to say it's not going to happen to them, and yeah, we're all frustrated. Like I said, what I do on a daily basis is considered an essential. Now, granted, there are aspects to the company that are essential, but where I am, even though my function is considered essential, there's been a number of folks, no masks, no gloves, doing non-essential stuff. And again, I don't know where their allegiances lie, but I do what I can, and some of my fellow co-workers as well, do what we can to keep ourselves safe in the midst of all this. But it's heavy. But if it's a thing of you don't have access to that and you have an essential need or an essential function, I'll give you a pass on that. But if you're walking around here willy-nilly, just not caring, not thinking anything is going to happen to you, or if you're buying into a certain type of rhetoric, then, like I said, I've got my waters, my fruits, my vegetables, accessing the ancestral realm, accessing whatever spiritual realm to stay centered, to stay healthy, and just constantly be on the defensive while I'm performing said essential function. So, it's crazy. And there's not a lot of people that are speaking up, that need to speak up, that are in better positions to speak up. This is a podcast celebrating an artist who would probably be saying some of the same things I'm saying, but he would say it a lot better and a lot funkier than I am at this particular juncture. But the thing is that the show can also be a platform as well. And, I'll be not necessarily with this particular podcast, but through the YouTube channel, starting to explore other avenues as to how to better use this platform and just speak up about certain things. But again, with this craziness that's going on, there are certain people, like I said, they're just buying into rhetoric, they're buying into the hype, they're not doing the homework, or they're following blind loyalties. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what side of the fence that you're on. Blindly following an ideology will get you into more trouble than thinking for yourself. And it's best if you learn to think for yourself than to just blindly follow what somebody says on the television or buy what a celebrity says just blindly right off the bat. Think for yourself. It ain't illegal yet. But by all means, take care of yourselves. Let's continue the good spirit, because we've been seeing a lot of that until this stupid stuff this past week. Let's take care of one another. Let's be appreciative. Let's honor these first responders. Let's honor these healthcare workers out here. The people that are food services, you name it. Logistic services, you name it. Let's continue to just be nice to one another. And it's like, yeah, you're frustrated, you're out of work, or whatever it is. But hey, this is now your time to shine. You've been given an opportunity at this juncture to maybe come up with something that you can own. And if these people running around here talking about they aren't free because the government made them stay home or whatever, then start you a business that they can't say it. I do this podcast. Like I said, this is sort of my way into that. I always protest about the conditions on my day-to-day thing, but this is my outlet, and this is something that I can build off of to ensure that freedom, ensure that ownership, and ensure that definition of funk. But yeah, there's no negativity allowed on this platform. So again, like I said, if you out here giving the finger to healthcare workers, because you following some idiot, goodbye. Hit stop. Leave this podcast now. And also too, around the world, all of a sudden, people that look like Africans are now the poster child of this thing. If that's your ideology and that's what you want to believe, go. So what we're gonna do here from this point on is just go ahead and keep it purple. And I'm not even a fan of yellow cake or lemon cake either. There's only 3 people in my life that I know can make it well. And when they make it, I will at least have a slice. But that's another topic for another day also. Jumping topics. Right now, we're going to jump right into the show. That is enough of my rant and my soapbox. Like I said, let's just stay healthy, stay safe. Don't pay attention to that rhetoric that's out there. Ignore it the best you can, but work on protecting your temple, which is yourself. So with that out of the way, let's start with our first topic. And our first topic is going to be my reaction to the Live at the Aladdin sampler. And just this past week, the 17th was the original release date for the One Night Alone Live, the One Night Alone or Up All Night box set, which contained the studio One Night Alone album, the reissue of the Rainbow Children. Of course, we know that has now been pushed to May 29th. And of course, at this stage, we don't know when anything is coming out anymore. But so far, that's still the tentative release date is May 29th. So as a bit of a buffer, the estate authorized the release of a sampler of the Live at Aladdin tracks. It's a 4-track EP, so to speak, and it had Pop Life, Strange Relationship, Got a Broken Heart Again, and Sometimes It Snows in April. So I had a chance to listen to it last night, and I mean, it sounds pretty good. I mean, there's nothing that's been remastered or remixed. Of course, it's the audio taken directly from the DVD, of course. But, we're all staying in for the most part. Except for maybe 3 days out of the week for me. But, we're all staying in, and it's a nice little thing because, hell, if he was here, if he was still with us, can you imagine what that set, would be like? What would that live from Paisley Park, would it be one man, Prince and just the piano? Would he have, would it be like a power trio and just guitar riffs? Who knows, folks? But like I said, this was pretty nice to hear. It was a good choice of songs on it. My favorite, because it comes at the end of the DVD and it's as the credits are going. And you kind of, I know when I had the DVD originally, that was something that it was like, oh, that sounds like that might be a nice little take on Sometimes It Snows in April. But it's kind of hard to get into because it was at the end credits and, just wasn't a lot going on like the rest of the DVD. So having to take it out of the DVD context and just give it a listen, that's a pretty beautiful arrangement. And the haunting part to me about it, and I mean not in a bad way, but something that was sort of, I don't know, a bit emotional, a bit moving, was when he says "thank you, good night" at the end of it, and it was just like, man, just how, moving that is. It's almost, still reaching out to us in some cosmic way, sort of. What was also weird as I was listening, no, actually, I take that back. I was listening to Parade yesterday also, as I'm working on, that'll be the next blog post, is my take on the Parade vinyl. So as I was listening to that and kind of scrolling through social media, right as sometimes when it snows in April ends, I'm seeing these different posts where it's Prince on his bicycle, riding away from the camera, and it's like, this is the last photograph of him at Paisley Park, and it was just like, man, damn, that's pretty heavy. But yeah, so sometimes it snows in April. This arrangement of it from the Live at Atlanta, and that's my favorite out of this EP sampler. Where when I had the DVD, Strange Relationship was one of the highlights for me on that DVD that I enjoyed. Rhonda Smith's bass playing on that is just phenomenal. So yeah, like I said, I'm looking forward to eventually, when all this is released. I know I pre-ordered the Up All Night set, and I pre-ordered the Rainbow Children, both in CD form. So I'm still looking forward to hearing that. I know of course, as this will air, of course I recorded the night before, but as this airs on Monday, we will be less than 24 hours away from the Prince tribute, on the Grammy tribute. So I don't know, I'm still hoping that Sony will drop a commercial somewhere in the middle of it or towards the end. Usually some of those things, special tributes, or sometimes when documentaries were broadcast on network television, celebrating whether it was the Beatles or Motown's 40th anniversary or something, usually towards the end there'd be just like a little tiny commercial dropping, oh, this, you enjoyed this documentary, now go to the stores and get this CD compilation of the songs you heard in this documentary, or get the Beatles anthology 1, 2, or 3, get those. So I'm hoping that Sony will drop something like that, if not during, at least towards the end, saying, hey, May 29th this comes out, Rainbow Children, One Night Alone, because I think it would provide a pretty good balance. One of the sort of drawbacks some people have expressed about the tribute is that it focuses mostly on 80s material. And again, like I said, I think that's because, it's on network television. These type of things are aimed more at the masses than they are at the fan base, so to speak. Usually because the Grammy tributes to past artists, it's been more of a generational thing, where it's like the Beatles era or Stevie Wonder's era. If you were around then, and you weren't so much picking up every single album or following every single solo project, or you weren't that deep cut of a fan, but when those hits were unfolding in real time, that was a part of whatever it was, your teenage years, your college years, or your grade school youth, or whatever significance that period may have had, or when that artist's impact was at its peak. That's what that's for. So people that aren't deep cut can go back and reminisce, like, oh, I remember that song from 85 or 86 or whatever. Oh, yeah, well, I remember Purple Rain and I enjoyed that. And it's like, they'll tune in. But like I said, that's mainly for the mainstream audience or, maybe younger viewers, because some of the artists like, her, Gary Clark Jr., a couple of other artists, that's for generations that weren't around in the 80s and maybe just discovering this for the first time, or maybe tune in and say, oh, that's what this was all about, and then start to go back and collect and dive in. But for those that are sort of grumbling about them just focusing on just the 80s, then having this commercial promoting those reissues would sort of hopefully provide that balance to say, oh, well, he was great in the 80s, but look what he did in the year 2000 and 2001 and 2002. He was, still great. So check this out. So I'm hoping that's what would happen. But, like I said, if you haven't had a chance to check out the sampler, it's on all of the streaming platforms that are available. Like I said, it's a nice listen. If you want to take a break from the madness, turn off the news, turn off the radio, you're tired of social media just talking about what's going on out there, this is a nice little distraction, for about 20 minutes or so. Nice 4 songs. You could just take a break, and it's smooth when it's smooth. Like I said, sometimes It Snows in April is probably the most, emotional point of me, because I get to hear it just in that context and not from the DVD. It's funky when it's funky. You dance when you dance, and you kind of mellow out when you mellow out. So it's nice, and like I said, it's a nice buffer. If you've never heard or seen any of the Live at the Aladdin material, this is what to expect if you have not heard the One Night Alone live material, or if you haven't heard the One Night Alone CD studio album. So definitely check it out. Like I said, it was a nice buffer, and like I said, a pretty good distraction. Although I was always pushing for something like The One to be dropped, but granted, that could be a little bit heavy. It's spiritually heavy. So kind of what we need right now. We still need to be spiritually heavy, but that's your own decision to make. So something like this, like I said, it's a positive distraction, or as George Clinton would call it, it's a positive nuisance. So definitely check that out, especially newbies. If you're not too familiar with this era, by all means, check it out. So what do you think? Have you had a chance to check out the sampler? Does it make you more excited for when these albums will officially be released on May 29th? Do you think the estate should have dropped something different, something from the vault as a buffer? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. And then we're going to move on from that to our next topic. And our next topic is, how cool would an Around the World in a Day Super Deluxe be? Now, I know what you're thinking. It's like, well, we don't know if we're getting a Sign of the Times Super Deluxe this year. We know that there's rumors of a Parade Super Deluxe that's lurking around and may come out at a later date. So why are we talking about Around the World in a Day? Well, originally, before stuff started getting crazier this week, and as we're coming up upon April 21st, I really wanted to make this as much of a fun-filled show as I could possibly make. And that was one of the topics I decided to come up with, because I've done one on how awesome a Parade Super Deluxe would be. But the challenge for me for this one, because Around the World in a Day wasn't, or ended up being not necessarily one of my favorite albums from the classic era, I would say the anticipation of it, I was more excited because I read that original little article in Rolling Stone like about a month or two before the album dropped, about the sort of listening party that was for it, with Warner Brothers. And it was Prince, and he comes in, it's Wendy and Lisa, they got the album in hand and they put the record on. And I forgot who wrote the article on that, but they were giving a breakdown of the songs. And based on that article, I was excited, for this coming out. Like, oh, okay, it's a little Beatlesque. That's different, which, as we know now, was the goal, to get as far away from Purple Rain as possible. So it's like, oh, so Beatlesque. So I didn't know what to expect, but when I got the album, there's parts of it I do enjoy. But I'll say this, outside of things like Condition of the Heart, I still like America. Tambourine I can still listen to. Just put it this way, it's kind of one of those, I have to be in a certain mindset to really put it on and listen to it from beginning to end. Like I said, it's not really one of my favorites from the classic era. In fact, to me, Parade is light years ahead of Around the World in a Day. Actually, Parade is basically it was what I was expecting when I was reading that Rolling Stone article about the listening party for Around the World in a Day. But with that said, Around the World in a Day produced some of the absolute best B-sides of his career. We were starting with back in the day with Gotta Stop Messing About, like, oh, hey, that's not on an album. But that wasn't really unusual for back then. And, I was still sort of discovering Prince, so it was kind of like, okay, that's cool, but nothing different. I've bought 45 some other artists, and usually the B-side, if it's not a song from the album before, then there is something a bit different and nobody really pays attention. And I wasn't that much into, or as a musician or trying to write songs, into like looking at the B-sides and paying closer attention when it came to other artists. But, some B-sides ended up being more enjoyable than others. But back to Prince, though, you started off with Gotta Stop Messing About. And then, of course, How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore? That was sort of the bar, the high bar starting to be set. And you had things like Horny Toad, which was cool. So you knew to start looking for them. And then you get to like 17 Days and it's like, aha, now we're getting somewhere. Like, this is heavy. This is just as good as anything on the album. But yeah, I think kind of that peak with Around the World in a Day, especially She's Always in My Hair, that is absolutely my favorite B-side. It would be number one on my favorite B-sides list if I did a top 5. And that was deep. And then the 12-inch, the extended version of that, dropped a little bit later. And then from there you get to Hello, which is a real funky commentary on, the paparazzi and the whole thing about, not showing up at the, We Are the World sessions and stuff. But that was pretty funky. And then when that extended version came out, and then the little sort of monologue or spoken word bit at the end, that is my favorite. I mean, you get all this funkiness throughout the whole extended version, and then it just ends on this whole thing about your shoes so far, you're so high you fall off and die from view, words are just like shoes. That that was pretty heavy. But then if you take a broader look at, say, when the Purple Rain recording sessions were starting to wind down, and the stuff that he was recording, stuff like there was, 100 miles per hour. He was just starting to write some of the stuff. Of course, it's, started off being, okay, will this be a different lineup of the time? Or not, we're going to change it and we're going to call it The Family. So, as he was trying to develop songs that would fit for that project, then you kind of had Jill Jones, the sort of the genesis of her album starting then. So all of that material right there. So whenever you want to pinpoint as a beginning for Around the World in a Day, as when those sessions and everything related to it within that period from beginning to end, to have those tracks be your sort of disc 2 or whatever, your 2 discs of vault material for Super Deluxe. Whew. So that for me, as far as level of excitement, it would be, say, equal to A Sign of the Times to Super Deluxe set. So right there, just based on the vault material, would elevate my anticipation for it to that status. And Parade, if you remember a few episodes ago, in my discussing why I would think that would be an awesome one, that's one to me that would be just for not only the deep cut fans, but if you're a fan of his artistic aesthetic. So it's beyond just the hits. It's beyond, say, even some of the B-sides, really. But just the sort of avant-garde of some of the stuff that would end up on a Parade, Super Deluxe. I mean, you have that. It goes in so many different directions, and it's so cinematic in its own context. So for this segment, I had to call in for backup on this one. What I did is got off the bookshelf here my Prince and the Purple Rain era studio sessions, 1983 and 1984, by Dwayne Tudor. If you do not have this book, I would recommend you go get it. It's almost a near fly on the wall accounting of just about every Prince recording session, which was a little bit easier to do when he was recording at Sunset Sound in LA. The stuff that was recorded in his home studio at the time, probably a little bit more challenging to narrow down exact dates or exact details, but Dwayne Tudor does a phenomenal job of connecting the dots and putting this in a really great chronological order. Like I said, it puts you right there in the recording studio, both at home and at Sunset Sound. But yeah, I was trying to really kind of pinpoint, I don't know, I'd say maybe June of 1984, you could start with accumulating vault material that would be sort of your part of the 2 discs of vault material for an Around the World in a Day Super Deluxe. So around June 1984, that was the beginning of the sessions for 100 miles per hour, which, even though that song ended up on Originals, so it's already been officially released. I don't know if this is an alternate version of that, but you can always just kind of do a updated mix for the Around the World in a Day box set if you decide to include it. From there, you got June 22nd of 1984, a song called Maserati, which was actually the working title for Susanna's Pajamas, which ended up on the Family album. So you have around this period, especially when you get to July, you have, of course, a lot of the songs that ended up being the Family album. Desire, High Fashion, Mutiny, And again, Susanna's Pajamas. I would love to see that on and around the world in a day box set. Really not necessarily for a parade. I would rather see it for this because number one, it was recorded within the time frame that the songs from around the world in a day were recorded. Let's see. Yep, and I mean all through July you've got let's see, July 23rd of 1984, America was recorded. The basic tracks for She's Always in My Hair were Wednesday, August 15th of 1984, and August 16th of 1984, the basic tracks for Around the World in a Day were recorded as well. So, I mean, there it is in a nutshell. Of course, definitely, disc one is your, whatever year it comes out, remastered mix of the original album. And then, of course, I guess your disc two would be your singles, the B-sides, extended versions of the singles, plus the B-sides, extended versions of those. So that's where you get your She's Always in My Hair. You would also get Hello. That would be the selling point for me right there, just off of that by itself. But also Girl. That's a track that's, I liked it originally. It was sort of left field from after coming off of She's Always in My Hair and Hello. But I really enjoy that, hearing it just over the years. It doesn't get old. I never get tired of listening to it. And when I do listen to it, I always enjoy it. So there's that B-side, 20-minute version of America that can fit on one disc. But then you get, like I said, when you get to sort of the vault material, and I guess maybe 2 CDs of vault material is pretty much the norm for right now. Unless it ends up in the hands of Sony and they may have a different format. And, if you've seen any of the Bob Dylan or Miles Davis box sets, those can be pretty expansive. A lot of those, you're talking 10 discs minimum in a lot of cases. So, if once Sony gets their hands on all the classic material, you might see expansive box sets on that order. And actually that would be well deserving. And I wouldn't mind waiting out an Around the World in a Day Super Deluxe so Sony can give it that type of care and attention. Or if you keep it just under the format of the type of Super Deluxe sets we've been getting thus far. It's, of course, 1999 is the only real template we have. The Purple Rain Deluxe could have been expanded by another disc of vault material, but that's cool for what it was, and maybe one day we'll get a more expanded version of that. But for Around the World in a Day, yeah, like I said, there's a lot of songs that you can include into it. Let me see. Let me go later towards the end of it. There's, of course, material for Apollonia 6 and then Sheila E.'s first album. To me, Dance Electric would have been a better fit on an Around the World in a Day Deluxe. And especially looking through this book again, if you go to Saturday, August 18th of 1984, the basic tracks for The Screams of Passion were recorded, and overdubs for the Dance Electric were also done in that same recording session. So, like I said, there's a lot you can just add to it. Let's see, more. Yeah, and as we kind of get into September, there's Raspberry Beret, Paisley Park. I was trying to look for. Yeah, no. Let's see. Of course, some of the stuff that may or may not have been part of Roadhouse Garden. Of course, we've got those on the Purple Rain Deluxe edition. Which, to me, like I said, that would have been better on an Around the World in a Day Deluxe. So I don't know. I would, once Sony gets control of everything, like I said, I wouldn't mind waiting for an expanded or see what they would do with an Around the World in a Day box set and include those songs. Even some of this stuff that's already been on the Purple Rain Deluxe. Go ahead, for completest sake, I would probably recommend that they put, Dance Electric on and Around the World in a Day. Put Roadhouse Garden and Our Destiny and Wonderful Laughs and all those, put those on an Around the World in a Day box set. And then because Warner Brothers will still retain control of Purple Rain, but whatever deal, they'll probably keep the same deal as they are now in regards to Purple Rain and Parade and Batman and Graffiti Bridge. But definitely have them take their time and work with the estate on putting together a proper Purple Rain Deluxe or box set and keep it to the material that was recorded, say, between 83 and, say, whenever the last song recorded for Purple Rain in those sessions officially, then anything that's vault related, just cap it off there and have that be your expanded box set, and replace this one. Definitely just replace this one. This one will still be in print for a while, but when they do that expanded box set, just go ahead and chunk this one into the bargain bins and let this one be the definitive Purple Rain box set. But we'll do a topic about that another day. Or actually, I'm going to have to go back in the archives because I think we've already done that. And I do believe we did. Go back and I have to look up the title, but it's does the possibility of an expanded Purple Rain Super Deluxe exist, or something like that? But yeah, definitely go back and check that out. But yeah, but just based on just everything that was recorded in and around those sessions, like I said, I don't know if you want to include his demos for Apollonia 6, or I guess you could. You could put Glamorous Life in there as well. That's kind of an iffy, but everything else, though, that's pretty much relevant. Especially the family material, for sure. Put that on that box set, or Super Deluxe, definitely. And like I said, my anticipation level for that will be matched right up there with the Sign of the Times Super Deluxe set. So, like I said, those are 3 from the classic era. After that, I don't know. I'm pretty good after that. There's 1999. Other than that, it would just have to be a project by project basis as far as what I would be looking for from the classic era. Yeah, but by all means, check out this book, Prince and the Purple Rain Era Studio Sessions. Dwayne Tudor is also working hard to complete the next volume in this set, which will cover it will cover Around the World in a Day, Parade, and Sign of the Times material. By all means, that'll be on my pre-order for the hardcover edition. But definitely pick this volume up about the Purple Rain Era Studio Sessions. Pick this up. Get it on your Kindle, your tablet. right now. I mean, if you do try to order a physical copy of it, if you do Amazon, of course, they're focusing on getting essentials and PPE materials into the hands of folks that need them the most. So that's their top priority. Hence why the what do you call it? The One Night Alone and Rainbow Children reissues were delayed as well. So if you do order through that channel, it may be a while before you get it. Otherwise, other bookstores, any brick and mortar locations that are doing mail order or online ordering, order through there if they have it, and you might get it a little bit quicker. But what do you think? Or would you be excited for an Around the World in a Day Super Deluxe set? Is that something that is high on your anticipation list? Or where does it rank amongst your anticipation for maybe one of your other favorite Prince albums that you would like to see get the box set treatment? Leave me your comments and let me know your thoughts. And then from there, we're going to move on to our third topic. And our third topic is the hashtag Prince to Me, which was something that the Prince estate created when they launched their website. And basically what it is on their website, it's you just kind of writing or relating your personal reflections of what Prince means to you. They've resurrected it on social media just this past week. And I did a sort of, I don't know, call it an almost Lennon-esque answer as my personal response. And that is, to me, that Prince was the 80s equivalent to what, say, Elvis and Little Richard were to kids in the 50s, in the 1950s. And for me, that's true. So basically what this segment is sort of my expanded one, because like I said, it would take forever to do it. I have yet to step up my video game, so I didn't want to put it on videos yet. So maybe next year, maybe next year, folks. But basically, I can't imagine a day since around August of 1981 that Prince was not somewhere in the background musically. You hear people talk about things being the soundtrack to their lives. This is definitely it. Now, I mean, there's other musical milestones for me as far as, reaching my teenage years back then. So, you're starting 1980 off with, I'm still a heavy Parliament Funkadelic head, so that was still there. Rick James was pretty much hardcore, that back, before hip hop, those was pretty much our hardcore, groups, or artists then. The Jacksons, 10 years into the game, then Michael drops off the wall. So there was that. For me, outside of those three things, then you also had like all the Solar Records stuff. That was a pretty huge influence on what I do too. The Shalimar, the Lakeside, the Whispers, that stuff. I was a big Beatles head, especially, that interest was growing and growing. So that side of it, used to watch Don Kirshner's rock concerts. So I was getting exposed to the Cars and the Police and Tom Petty and all those other groups, and getting exposed to that end of it. MTV, we didn't have cable, but, knew a couple of people that did. So MTV was still kind of just out of reach at that point. So that influence on me didn't hit till a little bit later. But in August, I don't know, Prince was on the radar too. But I remember hearing Soft and Wet for the very first time around, I don't know, probably pretty much summer of 1978. And, we didn't have central air then. So, like, summers would get pretty hot. And, we got the fans going and stuff. And it was uncomfortable, but, it didn't bother you. It was just like, oh, just having trouble sleeping. So, for me, one of the things that would calm me down, at 12 would be just sort of just put on the radio, and just kind of keep the volume low so it didn't wake up the whole house. So, so I'm trying to listen and trying to keep cool and trying to go back to sleep, and I guess usually when I would turn it on, then there would be that sort of block of songs, commercial free and all of that. So you didn't hear who the artist was. So I would come in and say maybe, Heat Wave would be playing, Groove Line or something. And then, Soft and Wet would come on. And then, maybe Evelyn Champagne King or something would come on right after that. So, DJ would come in or a commercial would come in. So I was like, man, I really dug that song in the middle of, Groove Line and, Shame. Who was that? Who's that group? Who was that band? And they never said it. And it's like just kind of, I would always catch it right at that time. Didn't matter what time that night. Just be like, click, turn the radio on. Then whatever block of songs, or if he did say it, I didn't catch it because it's like, well, here's, okay, here's Parliament. And then, here's Cameo, and then here's Prince, and then here's, so I might have missed it even then, but I never knew, but I liked that song. But, I had an uncle who's probably the biggest influence on me that's, not a famous musician or something, because he was into DJing. He also wrote record reviews for the local black paper here. And, he always had this huge record collection. Now, by the time I started like 14, 15, then, I wanted to be that cool where it was like, I've got every record on earth and, I could tell you who played what and why, because there would be these sort of family get-togethers, and then he would bring out all these different blues records, that some family members hadn't heard probably since it came out or whatever, and they're reminiscing, and the liquor is all around, and then he's the center of it all, putting on the records, changing the records, and it's like, oh, that had so and so playing the guitar on that one. Oh, and then that one, that was written because of blah 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 blah, and that type of stuff. So it was like, yeah, I wanted to be that guy growing up, So, but before then, the second Prince album is out, and, he's trying to get me to listen to it because he's like, oh, it's better than Michael Jackson. And I'm like, no way. Can't be. No, really. Nope. Don't want to hear it. Nope. Puts it on, and of course, I Want to Be Your Love is the first thing, and did not register a bit. So kind of left it at that. And fast forward to around summer of 1981. And by this time I had pretty decent component set. It was a Panasonic component set. Got it for Christmas. And it had the cassette. Of course, the turntable, obviously. The AM FM receiver. And also had an 8-track. So this had everything. This was a pretty cool thing to have. And, it was like, cool, I can listen to everything in stereo. And I can have bass and I can have treble. Because before then, the kind of record player I had since I was like 7, just a little single mono thing. And which was cool. A lot of good memories from that little record player. But kind of before, and probably maybe what led to like, oh, we got to get him a real record player. I had another friend, he was good with speakers and stuff. So he managed to get like this speaker from like a busted radio and basically rewired my little mono record player and made a stereo out of that. So that was pretty functional till, for a couple of years until I got this component set. So for Christmas. And I had a friend who would borrow records from other people in the neighborhood. And he would buy a bunch of blank cassettes, bring these over to my house, and then, make the copies and everything. And then he'd take the records back to, whoever he borrowed them from, and then he'd have his cassettes on it. So this was the day that I became both a Prince fan and a Teena Marie fan, both of those the same day. Because he brought over Dirty Mind and he brought over Teena Marie's Irons in the Fire. And, now, grooving off of the Teena Marie, I think he recorded that one first. Because I think it was kind of like, Prince guy, oh, no, I don't want to hear, no, get, bring this even in my house, man. It's like, get rid, I don't want to hear this, I don't want to hear this dude. But, like I said, I took the Teena Marie one right away. But then, he made his tape of the Dirty Mind album. I don't even know what I did. I just probably just grabbed a bunch of comic books and was just reading and just let him do his thing and get this over with and whatever, just take the album on with you. So, so I think I didn't pay much attention to it as he was making the recording of it. So what happened was that when he finished, of course hung out for a while. When he left, he took the records with him, but he accidentally left the tape behind. And I was like, yeah, whatever. So, I don't know, give it a, I don't know if it was a couple, no, it couldn't have been a couple of weeks later. Let's just say, let's see, that one visit. So like maybe the next week. Was it even the next week? Now that I think about it, that's wrong. Okay, so, yeah, he left the tape. Okay, so because of course he would have had to come back to get the tape. Or I would have seen him at school that Monday and given him the tape then. So basically later on that evening, or that day, I had nothing to do. It's Saturday, I'm like 15. I've got no money, no job or anything. You can't go anywhere, no car. So what do you do on a Saturday afternoon? You do nothing. So I'm, just kind of just sitting around, just kind of bored for Saturday. Nothing's really happening, nothing's going on. And I'm like, I played all the records I had, So I'm like, I want to listen to something else. Well, he did leave that tape, and I did like that Teena Marie. So I did play that. And then that tape ran out. And I'm like, oh. So just, I don't know, just on a whim, I put this Prince tape in. And just kind of listened to it. Because, like I said, I didn't have both ears open for the second album. So let me see what all the fuss. But I did notice there was a big image, sort of an image change between the two albums. Like, this one was really different than the one before. So, just kind of remembering that, like, okay, well, let me give this a shot. And, so I started listening to it. And, so the first thing is Dirty Mind. Now, remember, like I said, at this time, especially on a Saturday night, you're allowed to stay up a little bit later than normal. So my thing was, at night would be Saturday Night Live, and then switch over and watch the Three Stooges. And then right after that, like around 2 o'clock or so, would be Don Kirshner's rock concert. So, like I said, I'm into new wave now, so it's like, because I've seen the Cars and I've seen Blondie and, all these other acts on Don Kirshner. So it's like, oh, this music's pretty cool. So I'm listening to Dirty Mind, and it's got that same sort of vibe to it. So I'm like, okay, it's kind of new wavy. Okay, I can get that Dirty Mind. Okay, yeah, get the lyrics. Okay, cool. And then, of course, the next song, When You Were Mine. and that's kind of got that Beatles thing to it. It's like, okay, this has got a little Beatles thing to it. And of course, I like the Beatles at this point. I've had a few albums, especially the early stuff I had a lot of too. So When You Were Mine kind of fits that, because I had that Beatles, the red one, 1962 to 66. So it has that sort of Please Please Me sort of almost near chord structure with it. So I was like, okay, so, he's not just some guy, that's whatever, that can play a bunch of instruments and is a bit like, oh, yeah, I can play a bunch of instruments, snob. It's like, okay, he's into different sounds. So, you got Dirty Mind, is new wave, and then this is Beatles. And then, of course, the next couple of songs were pretty conventional. And it was like, okay, that was pretty good. Especially Do It All Night. That one I've really had taken to a lot of over the years. So then now we get into side 2 of the record, which is still all, because all the songs fit on one side of the tape. So now we get into Uptown. And then I'm just kind of like, okay, all right, this is pretty good. But I'll tell you, the one that really clinched it for me was Head. And not just the subject matter, folks, but that was on some Parliament Funkadelic level stuff for me. Because that was sort of my litmus test. If you could be as funky as Parliament Funkadelic, you're in. Now, granted, like I said, there's Heatwave. They're pretty funky, and that was one of my favorite groups at the time. You had the Jacksons. They were doing their own sort of funky thing. Who else was I listening to? Like I said, you had Lakeside, Fantastic Voyage. That was cool. But like I said, nothing really could beat that, except for Roger. Except, maybe More Bounce to the Ounce. And then, to me, I really wasn't too keen on the solo one that much, except for So Rough, So Tough. That was about the only one that I really liked. But from Zap, it was More Bounce to the Ounce, and then Zap 2. And to me, that was sort of on par, because basically they were kind of somewhat offshoots of P-Funk anyway. At least, they tried to sign them and work with them, but then, Roger took the group and did something else by the second album, or by his solo album. So, by the time Head is playing on here, and it's like I said, just that, it was that Parliament Funkadelic level of funk to me. Then I was like, okay, I'm in. I'm in. And then, of course, Sister, I think when my friend was recording it, he was trying to tell me about the song Sister, and it was just like, that's just weird. I don't want to hear about that. That's deep, but it still kind of drew you in a bit, because it's like, wow, he's willing to tackle that subject lyrically. So, that takes a lot of guts to do that. And then when you get to Party Up, and like I said, I'm, learning about the Beatles and stuff, and, John Lennon and the whole Give Peace a Chance, and, Stop the War. And, growing up, but, you're a little kid in that era, and it's like you've seen all this stuff on the news about how bad Vietnam was. But a lot of that sentiment had carried over to the late 70s. And it was starting to look like we were heading back to that trajectory in the 80s, with the whole Reagan-Bush era. That was at the beginning. So, the mindset was that, we're going to eventually head back into one of those wars that, make absolutely no sense. And for something like Party Up, it really had his finger on the pulse of that, because like I said, that sentiment was 10 years earlier, and nobody was really saying it on record anymore, because you had disco, which was basically just feel-good music. It was just, definitely make love, not war, but it just wasn't saying it. It was just like, it was just all love, or lust, depending. But you had disco, and then you kind of had new wave, and you did kind of have punk that was sort of anti-establishment. So maybe that was still what was carrying that sentiment over into the late 70s. But you didn't have a lot of black artists, maybe except for Rick James, Ghetto Life, that type of thing. Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five a year later with The Message. But, you know, everything was still party, 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 disco, disco, disco. And that sort of, you know, that sort of John Lennon, Bob Dylan, Curtis Mayfield era was starting, you know, Stevie Wonder era was starting to feel played out, you know, by the time you got to 1980. So to have an artist like Prince still carry that sentiment with just that one lyric, you know, you're going to have to fight your own damn war because we don't want to fight no more. And, you know, that's something even now, you know, because like I said, these are some weird times we're living in, you know, and stuff, again, it keeps changing and changing by the minute. And, you know, we need some balance. We need some balance. We need music that's going to make us feel good. And we're also going to need some music that's going to help us think or make us think or, you know, kind of level out this entropy, because you need some music where somebody's saying something that's going to make sense, because what a lot of these people that people are looking to make sense are not making any sense at all. And like I said, regardless of whatever, you know, opinion you come from, at the end of the day, you have to be able to think for yourself, you know, and just not blindly fall for anything that's being said out here. And self-preservation is the key. And then you got your loved ones to think about as well. But anyway, but like I said, a song like Party Up, to have that sort of anti-war message come in at the end, you know, it's like, to me, that was more punk funk than Rick James. You know, it embodied because with Rick James, the whole Super Freak thing was more satire than anything. And it was satire that just happened to be a big hit record, and probably his biggest hit record. But Party Up, which is a very deep cut song, and then props to Morris Day for coming up with that groove. But Party Up is that deep cut song, and it captures more so the vibe and the feel of what bands like the Cars were actually playing, you know, that type of sound. It matched it very well, as opposed to where, you know, Super Freak, it's new wavy, but it's very slick. The production is very slick, where the whole do-it-yourself approach with the way that Dirty Mind was recorded as a whole, it fit that sort of punk, you know, vibration out there. It kind of hit that frequency very well. So that was my gateway into Prince. And from that point on, no matter what was going on, whether you can attach it to a major milestone as to what was happening globally, but more so as to what I was dealing with as an individual. Good times, bad times, ups, downs, growing up. I mean, it couldn't have hit at a more perfect time. I mean, granted, you've got some cats that were probably in their 20s that gravitated towards Dirty Mind and got into the whole Prince musical singularity that way. But I tell you, there is nothing like being 15, 16, 17 and having that unfold. So Dirty Mind, and like a couple of months later, after being exposed to that album, it was like, okay, this is the dude. To hear Controversy on the radio for the first time, and I was fortunate enough to hear the album version of it, and it was like just that, just that. I was like, okay, yeah, this is it. This is okay. I'm in. I'm getting this record for sure. But when it gets to that sort of middle eight, and he drops in with the Lord's Prayer on that, you know, remember, hip hop wasn't where it is now. I mean, yes, there's a lot of intelligence in the wordplay and a lot of talent in the wordplay of the MC. But it was, like I said, you were still a year away from Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five dropping the message. So to have an artist be this bold, and like I said, you haven't had an artist that was that bold in a long time. You know, mainstream, black or white, really. You know, yeah, granted, Springsteen was singing for the people, you know, the blue collar workers, excuse me, the blue collar workers and all that. But to do it on the magnitude of the way a John Lennon would have done it, or Bob Dylan, or Curtis Mayfield, you know, to do something so bold lyrically on a record, you hadn't had that type of excitement. So, like I said, there's nothing more magical than having been around 15 or 16 or 17 at that time and hearing this for the very first time. And if you were also fortunate enough to be a musician at that age, this became our 50s equivalent. So for everybody that picked up a guitar in the 50s because they saw Elvis or Chuck Berry, or, you know, you got so, you know, to be a Paul McCartney and to be so influenced by Little Richard that you could almost match him vocally note for note, almost, because no other white entertainer, you know, you look at that travesty that was Pat Boone trying to cover Tutti Frutti and Long Tall Sally. It just wasn't happening. But to have this kid from Liverpool come in and do that, you know, that's the 80s was our equivalent to that, you know, where Michael Jackson was our Elvis, Prince was our Little Richard, you know, Rick James was our Roy Orbison. You know, I can make the comparisons for days. You know, Morris Day is our Jerry Lee Lewis. You know, that the magnitude of what rock and roll was to people in the 50s, funk in the 70s, the late 70s and early 80s, you know, that was our movement. And, you know, when I say that people, when they went to go see Purple Rain, ran out and got bands the next day, you know, I always say that here, people in 1984, when Purple Rain came out, people ran out and got bands the next day. Now, when Colors came out in 1988, people ran out and got gangs the next day. And, you know, but on a musical note, you know, nothing had that type of influence, say, since maybe A Hard Day's Night. You wouldn't have had the Byrds be who they were. They were just a little folk band. The Lovin' Spoonful was just a folk band. You know, they just would have been just acoustic guitars and trying to copy Bob Dylan before even he went electric. But the minute A Hard Day's Night came out, everybody went and traded those acoustics for electric guitars, you know, and 12-string Rickenbackers. And, you know, every drummer was trying to be Ringo at that point, you know, back then. So to have Purple Rain have that sort of influence as well, I mean, that was heavy. I mean, I had bands before Purple Rain, but, you know, nothing said be gung-ho about it than Purple Rain. But, yeah, and like I said, I can make a whole 2 or 3 episodes on, like I said, where certain songs were and certain people and all of that. Like I said, a lot of good times, a lot of bad times, and even during those kind of rough periods, you know, whatever you're dealing with, whether it's being a teenager, whether you know, just dealing with the day-to-day of just being an adult, you know, you're in your early 20s, you know, I mean, those, you know, those songs, those albums were there. And like I said, I could spend volumes just talking about it, but just to have those songs there, it's your, it's your comfort food sometimes. It's your motivation. It's your theme song, depending, you need that motivation sometimes. For years, Housequake was sort of my anthem, my own personal anthem. The B-side to Love or Money was just, I just remember especially once I got the 12-inch single to Kiss, so just that extended version and that, just wanting to just constantly hear that all the time, regardless of what other music was going on or regardless of whatever else I was listening to. It was just like, I've got my hands on that extended version of Kiss and Love or Money, and just playing those over and over and over. There are, outside of, there's only, one person from grade school that, I really still keep in contact with, and that's very pre-Prince. But I would say if it was not for the music of Prince, there would not be friendships, maybe some of them still, but I would say the friendships and the camaraderie and the brotherhood, that without that music sort of being the centerpiece in one way, shape, or form, would these people still be around? I know there's definitely some, that, I've played music with, would not probably have not had happened had it not been for Prince. I know when I got to California, I've met some of the best musicians on the planet to me because of that. Seeing the Sign of the Times film, that wouldn't have happened. God, I could just go on and on and on. And I don't know. I don't want to write a book one day of, Prince's music and my life, but, kind of going or reminiscing through some of the memories, some kind of a book, and maybe, getting all of that out. But, like I said, there's not a minute or a day or a year that has gone by. If he was still around now, would I be doing this podcast? Probably. I'm going to lean probably not. I would probably struggle to find something else, and it probably wouldn't have been a podcast. I know I was toying with the idea of doing blogs, which I finally got around to doing. Now, What's in the Crate blog, and that covers just about everything that's in my vinyl collection. And I'm touched on Prince when I wrote about the Rufusized album, but the next one that's coming up, I'm almost done with it. That will focus on the Parade album. So check out my What's in the Crate blog. But that's probably, I would be doing more of that. Definitely more of my own music. I'm still trying to do more of my own with that. But, like I said, that's all those records, because it set a bar. And the thing was, my challenge was to get as far away from sounding like him as humanly possible. Because, God, we took so much damn flack. Just even trying to be ourselves as musicians. This is sort of a little small-minded area that we're in. And especially more so back then in '84. But, you're wearing Jerry curls. You're not even wearing purple. You look more like Crockett and Tubbs than you do anybody in Prince's camp, but they just wanted to drop you in that Prince glass of water. Or if they found out you played guitar or you played any type of instrument or you into music, it's like, oh, Prince, and they point at you, Prince and Purple Rain and all this other stuff. And that was sort of the challenge, while everybody else was trying to sort of emulate that, we were trying our best not to emulate that. And I remember reading, it was Stephen Ivory interviewing Prince for Black Beat magazine. And I remember the line that says, hey, the best way you want to be me is to be yourself. And from that point on, that was around probably like 86 when I read that. You know, and that had been the absolute challenge. You know, it's cool to be influenced by him. I'm constantly influenced by him. But, you know, I had always wanted to get as far away as possible from those comparisons, because that's the thing. You know, you strive to be yourself, to strive to have your own voice. And that's another beauty of it as well. Going from musical influence throughout the 80s, and like I said, your teenage years and your college years, and you know, your early 20s, you know, that was the musical influence, or even some of the attitude, not just Prince, the time, you know, that sort of, you know, just kind of like, you know, hip hop kind of gives you that sort of attitude to be whatever, you know, those records too, you know, because like I said, we were just, you know, comic book readers and sometimes trying to write and illustrate comics and stuff, wanting to infiltrate that world. And, you know, so we weren't the most popular cats around. You know, that was a process of growth, and it took a process of building, say, our own images, so to speak, to, you know, to have girls even look this way, you know, sometimes. So it's like I said, those were the motivating factors with that. So to go from that influence, and then you transition over to the 90s, and here's this thing of owning your masters, about freedom, about ownership. And so for me, from the mid 90s, and even more so now, the influence has been more than the music. It's been just his worldview, which is freedom, ownership, you know, in addition to finding that definition of funk. So, I mean, that's the thing, you know, for me, there's times when I've done my own thing. There's times when I've owned my own thing. Then there's been times when I've had to do what I've had to do just to, you know, on a responsibility tip, you know, or even a survival tip. But that philosophy, you know, especially when you're in those situations where you're being responsible, and those situations where you're just trying to, you know, you're keeping the lights on, the food on the table, whatever you're trying to do. When you run across those situations or those individuals that try to put a ceiling on you, that try to put a cap on you, or try to put you in a certain glass of water, or try to have or exhibit a certain amount of control on you, you know, in addition to a Malcolm X, you know, in addition to a Martin Luther King, you know, in addition to a John Lennon, you know, like I said, Prince example in the 90s, and, you know, or conscious hip hop, you know, Chuck D, Professor Griff, cats like that, you know, that fighting for freedom and ownership and standing up for yourself in the face of adversity. You know, there's been times I've had to challenge said system, paid the price for it in a few occasions, but at the end of the day, it's always a good night's sleep. But like I said, to have Prince as one of those sort of shining examples of putting it all on the line for freedom and for ownership, and to sometimes speak up or sometimes do things quietly, you know, it's like, you know, that's amazing, you know, to go through that existence, be the greatest musician on earth, and then at the same time be able to make a difference in the lives of so many people. Now, I know there's been some stuff coming up that I definitely wasn't going to address this episode. I'm actually going to reserve my opinion till after I've watched the Grammy tribute. So, you know, that stuff, is irrelevant in the context of really what's going on in the world. And at the end of the day, what this individual represents, again, like I said, not only is one of the greatest musicians, but one of the greatest artists of all time. And to do all of that and still find the time to try to make a difference in the lives of others. Now, like I said, personal relationships are personal relationships. But at the end of the day, it's about who you help. Like I said, which is why for this particular show and for the rest of Omari Communications, it's about exploring those avenues of independence, of freedom, hopefully trying to make a difference at some point. But, let's leave this crazy, fear-inducing or fear-influenced, petty squabbles. Let's keep that out of the narrative, with a lot of this. But, getting back to Prince, like I said, I can just go on forever and ever about the tremendous difference. Again, like I said, I don't know if I would have been doing a Prince themed podcast if he was still around. But for me, like I said, because of my day-to-day, there's not a lot of people I can really talk to about it. And the people I can talk to, it's just a matter of time. I no longer have that work-life balance, even in the face of all this stuff going on now. And, just, it kind of gives me an outlet to say some things that in the circle of musical scholars of like minds, I get to, air this out. So, like I said, I can just do this for days, but for the most part, when looking back on it, that's a magnitude. And like I said, to have it unfold in real time, where even though I lived in an era where all four Beatles were alive, they just weren't together as a band. But that was sort of like, how you're interested in just history anyway, and it's kind of like, oh, well, this was when they were around then. I wasn't around in 1964. I was around in 1966, but I was a little tiny baby, it was like, I couldn't get into it. But, like I said, the magic of being 15 and having an artist of that magnitude, you're introduced, it's unfolding in real time. One day When Doves Cry didn't exist, now it may have existed within the weeks or however when he recorded it between that time and it was dropped on radio. But for the rest of us, it was one day in May of 1984. That song did not exist. Then there was an afternoon when I heard it on the radio in May of 1984 for the first time. And there's rarely been a record before or since that has had that magnitude of When Doves Cry, because it was just so different from anything before then. And what he was doing after, I mentioned it in the blog article that's coming up for Parade. Kiss was different. It didn't quite have the same impact, but it was just like, damn, this is different. And then when you listen to it a second time, damn, this is good. So we were used to that. And then Sign of the Times was a quantum leap forward. Like I said, one day that record didn't exist. But then there was a day, one morning in 1987, getting ready for college class, and that was on the radio. Man, hearing the Sign of the Times album all the way through for the first time. I remember first getting the cassette. And Prince ballads were always great. I know he measured Do Me Baby as when he finally mastered the art of doing a ballad. And that was damn good. But hearing Adore for the first time. And I mean, it wasn't just hearing it for the first time. It was not counting that. It was when I got to sit down and really listen to it. Which, that feeling has never gone away from that initial listening all the way through now. And there's so many albums. And then now there's albums you go back to that say weren't so much of a favorite to me, that I go back and it's like picking up little nuances or hearing it from a different perspective, and or it's because I'm not being challenged with his newer output that now I can sit down and really pay attention to this and like, was I tripping or did I not like this album? Or it's like, damn, I was tripping. I really like this album. Like I said, I could just go on for days. But that in a nutshell, and that's some nutshell, look how long it took, but in a nutshell, that's what Prince means to me. Hashtag Prince to me. That's, that's it in a nutshell. Like I said, I don't want to dwell on the finality of it all. But, I was one of those, I was in disbelief, I'm that kind of person. Like I said, I don't fall for entropy. So when I see stuff, whether it's on social media, whether it's on, breaking news, blah, 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 this happens, then I'm checking the source, or I'm checking sources after that. I'm not even just relying on one. But, especially up until that time, there were a lot of these hoaxes and stuff that was going on. And it was like, I didn't want to believe it. But at the same time, 2016 was like, I think then, even now, it's like a Thanos snap. It's just kind of like you wake up and things change, But yeah, I was in just a daze. I was just in shock. But I think it really hit, because everybody was having these sort of, that weekend following, whether it was the video channels or the radio stations, YouTube, because the floodgates opened from that point on, where, he was no longer around to send the cease and desist orders, but there was just floodgates and floodgates of vault material and bootleg material all over YouTube. And it was one, I listened to the last show, Piano and a Microphone, in Atlanta, and that's the one that hit. It was kind of like I said, I was just in a daze. It's like I was trying to communicate with fellow musicians, and it was just like, one didn't want to deal with it, which is understandable, and the other one was just like, yeah, I know. But like I said, I was just kind of like in this, like I said, just sort of in the daze, just that entire weekend. And then, like I said, when I finally listened to the Piano and a Microphone from Atlanta, I listened to that, and you got to the end of that, and I think that was the sort of the reality hitting you on that one. So like I said, I don't want to dwell too much on that one. Like I said, I just want to keep all the memories fond, and like I said, even the, whatever you were going through, if you were around in the 80s or if you're around in the 90s, whatever he means to you, you know what I'm talking about. Like I said, it's like I said, it could be a comfort food. It's that motivation you need for whatever, to get through a day, to get through a crisis or whatever, get you over that hump. Or it's just feel good listening music, or you dissecting the bass line, or it's like, okay, what chords is he playing on this? Or, what type of keyboards is he using? Is this the Oberheim 8? Is it this? Is it the Linn drum machine here? oh man, is it Morris that's playing drums on this one, or you know, or that bass line from Less Work, and you know, which all too. I think that night, I think when I got home from work, that initial night, went down to the computer and my bass was nearby, and the last two things that I played for a long, long time, it was Less Work and 7779311. Just play that on, just play that and didn't pick it up again until really sometime around last year. Really. You know, just like I said, just a lot of good memories. So, like I said, I could just go on and on, but we'll just end it here. And again, of course, your fond memories, definitely leave them hashtag Prince to me on the Prince Estate website, or hashtag it on social media. Let them know. Tell them thank you for keeping it going. I know they're going through some stuff still. Just trying to survive, even though, there's all these money-making ventures, they're still struggling and stuff. So, tell them don't give up the fight. Refer them to last week's episode. Like I said, I don't know if that would help. Form an LLC, so the profits that come in, you're still alleviating that tax debt, but you're paying yourself like you're paying an employee. And hopefully, I don't know, but tell them thank you. Of course, leave comments here, and of course, your questions, your topic ideas, and all of that. Continue to leave that as well. But we're going to end that topic. The purple spotlight is going to be a little bit different this week because I am just going to talk about first, I mentioned earlier, the What's in the Crate. It's a blog post on WordPress, and it's just basically little anecdotes about my feelings towards things in my vinyl collection. So the last one I dropped was on the Parlette album, Invasion of the Booty Snatchers. If you don't know who Parlette is, they're sort of the female equivalent to Parliament. George Clinton is the mastermind behind it. The whole P-Funk mob is there on the production, the writing, the playing. And of course, I know a lot of you might be familiar with the Brides of Funkenstein, but yeah, Parlette was just as good too. And that album is really good too. To me, it's sort of like Volume 1, Volume 2. When you have Parliament's Motor Booty Affair, then there's Parliament's Invasion of the Booty Snatchers. But two great albums. But I did write the article on that one. That's the latest one that's up. I'm working on one for the Parade album right now. I'm just kind of like 25% into it now. So I'm going to try to finish that up and get that up this week as well. But if you're a fan of other types of music, there's a Beatles compilation I've done. I mentioned Prince a lot in the post I wrote about Shaka Khan and Rufus's Rufusized album. So I reference or quote a lot of the beautiful ones in that. So if you're interested in that, by all means, check that post out. But there's a couple of other ones that are up there, but there's more and more as I do this, and I'll include more Prince albums as well. But definitely check that out. Also, too, this week, immediately after the Prince Grammy tribute, I am going to record my review of the program, and that's going to be on YouTube. So I recorded that Tuesday night, so Wednesday it will be up on YouTube to see. So check out the Amari Communications channel on YouTube. That will be up, so it'll be my spoiler review for the Prince Grammy tribute on Tuesday. In addition to that, I'm also going to drop something called The Hits and the B-Sides on YouTube. And basically, it's just segments from past episodes of Amari Purple Talk. So those of you that are just jumping on the bandwagon and you don't have time to go back and listen to every single episode from the last 6 months, these will be topics that I'll pull from that are still relevant now. Of course, things like 1999 Super Deluxe or anything that wasn't released then but have been released now, we won't include those so much. But certain segments that are still relevant or that you may have missed out on will be posted for that Hits and the B-side. So I'm going to try to work on that in a minute and drop the first one, but just kind of keep checking back on the Amari Communications YouTube channel. And, I'll just keep dropping those sporadically. I'll try to get a couple of more out before the end of the week as well. Outside of that, that's it. Just check out those things. And, of course, there's always Amari merchandise. Again, if you order from Cafe Press, you'll probably get that direct. And that usually arrives via the post office with that. So, like I said, right now, I know logistics as far as like your FedEx, your UPS, Amazon. I know they're trying to concentrate on, getting the essentials to people. And that's what I would rather see happen. Let's get these materials to these hospitals. Let's get life-saving or protective equipment to individuals that desperately need it. So let them concentrate on that. And, like my book, Revolution of the Soul, it's a book of poetry. There's a paperback edition, but like I said, you can get it through Amazon or your book. If you can get it through your bookseller, order it online that way. But as far as Amazon, like I said, if you order it, you'll get it eventually. But if you want to get it now, it's also a Kindle version that is on sale for $2.99, and that is actually going to be on sale for that price for another couple of days. Actually, I'm going to try to go back in and extend that a little bit longer, as long as it possibly takes. So by all means, definitely check that out. Also, leave a review on Amazon, or you can always check the show notes where you can leave comments and topic ideas, leave comments about the book as well there. And that is going to end our episode 35 of Amari Purple Talk. Like I said, let's take care of each other. Like I said, let's ignore this crazy stuff that's going on. Try to protect yourselves, because like I said, there's people out there running around and they just not giving a damn right now. And you want to definitely protect yourselves against them. Try not to be hostile or anything towards anybody, but definitely protect yourself. If you got your mask, have your mask. If you got your gloves, practice your social distancing, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, cats and kitties. But by all means, let's stay healthy. I think for me, I'd always been one that's, I've got like different fruits and different veggies in my water when I drink it. So, hopefully had a good head start, on my immune system. But like I said, these things are not definite cures, but let's take this stuff, and build your immune system. So either you're fighting it off, or if you got it, you can fight it off faster or whatever, or you can recover faster or whatever. But definitely by all means, let's vitamin up, folks. Let's do that. Like I say, have your mask, have your gloves out here, because like I said, we don't know what's going on. And those that do aren't in any big hurry to really, really tell us what's going on. So basically, you want to protect yourself, regardless of what you're feeling right now, regardless of what you're going through right now. We all have opinions, and you're entitled to those opinions. That's what makes this particular country what it is that we all have different opinions. But let's look out for one another too, because that is the key. And I mean, that's the key for the whole planet. You know, these people make whatever decisions and not really thinking, or they're so far removed from what we're thinking or what we're feeling. They're not really asking us what we're feeling or what we're thinking. They're just assuming it. But when stuff happens and it's there, or it's designed to try to break your spirit, let's tap into that part of our human nature, or let's tap into our spiritual, our God nature. And let's just try to, let's just rise above it. Let's just, don't give in to the entropy. Take care of yourself. Take care of your health. Take care of your spirit. Take care of your body for sure. And that's going to end this episode of Amari Purple Talk. You'll find me on social media, Twitter at RichardCole_now, and on Instagram at RichardCole_Amari. So let's keep it purple and on the one.